How are you? Good? Great. Thanks for coming. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respect to elders past and present, and to acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I have housekeeping. You all got a cocktail? All right, fuck yeah, let's get this funeral done. So as we all know, tonight is part of Wheeler Centre's Spring Fling program, which goes till the end of October. If you want to find more of their events, I don't know if they have cocktails at all of them, just for the dead guy ones, I don't know. So go to wheelercentre.com. The cocktail that you're sipping is from our friends at Melbourne Gin Company. Our beautiful bookseller readings. Ben will be signing books after the event for about half hour or so, or more, if you just take him up like David Sedaris and just never let him go. I'll keep an eye on the time. I'll make time for a short Q&A at the end. There's a very new system called Slido, which has got a QR code and an iPad. What could go wrong? Nothing could go wrong, it'll be fine. So I think you do the QR code and send questions in at about 1:45, and I'll give you a prompt if you want to send questions in again. That's the housekeeping, so we can get to official proceedings. My name is Marieke Hardy, and I'm going to die. And so are you, and so is everyone in this room. Tonight! No, just kidding. No, I thought that was really funny at home in the shower. I'm like, oh, it's a cult thing. We're all going to die. So my guest this evening is also going to die. And over the next hour, we'll be taking a deep dive on how he feels about mortality, and we'll also be helping him plan his own funeral, to which I assume we're all invited. And he has worn a very jazzy shirt to his funeral tonight, which I really enjoy. Also, just to share with you a little backstage tea, Ben's beautiful wife, Kylie, was with us backstage before, and she just started laughing, and we looked over and she said, I'm just thinking about Ben's funeral. And I'm like, they'll unpack that later on, it's fine. If you don't know Ben Shewry is an internationally renowned chef, restaurateur, husband, father, son, brother, friend, and creative obsessive, as you will know if you've read his magnificent book. His CV includes owner of Attica in Melbourne's inner suburban Ripponlea. We all know where fucking Ripponlea is, don't we? Writer of 2 books, Origin and Uses for Obsession, semi-pro, playlist builder, amateur filmmaker, part-time photographer, and full-time renovator. He also holds the world record for desperate COVID side hustles. Please welcome tonight's funeral guest, Ben Shewry. Hi.
Wow, thank you. That's very generous.
Oh, it's your funeral. We have to be nice to your dead.
You do, don't you? That's what I love about the idea of it.
Do you know what? I didn't even say. This is 2 introverts on stage together. What could go wrong? Because you talk about in your book being an introvert as well, and I'm like, extroverted introverts represent.
Indeed, yeah. Even though Kylie, who also laughed when of the thought of me dying, has said that I'm not an introvert. I'm absolutely am.
Yeah. I mean, Kylie, come on, So I think when you know, and extroverted introverts, so you need to get your energy back. Now, we're going to plan your funeral tonight. We're going to talk about your death, but death is not a new subject for you. In your book, you speak about numerous near-death experiences, including one which I liked very much, not the first part, but the second part. You were on your way to have a very fancy lunch, I think, at Mark Restaurant in Sydney, which I don't think is with us anymore. No. Mark spelt with a Q-U-E, that's how you know it's fancy. And you were hit by a bus on the way, and you still went to lunch.
I did.
Yes. Does that mean food trumps death for you?
Definitely, always. Yep, no, always thinking about the next meal, even when I am suffering from internal injuries, actually.
Yeah, you arrived there bruised and battered and got a drink, is that right? And then sat through a degustation. I mean, I'm impressed. I'm sorry to laugh like Kylie at your funeral. No.
I mean, I should confess that I was 27 or 28, and this meal was not. It was a very rare thing for me to be able to have this sort of meal. So I was really looking forward to it, and the bus did hit me squarely between the shoulders and my back and threw me forward and then drove off. And everybody walked past, which was kind of shocking, until 2 really kind people helped me out, and I made my way up to the restaurant eventually. I was bloody and bruised, and I was about 30 minutes early, and I tapped on the door, and they let me in. They didn't know who I was. It didn't matter. They made me a really stiff drink, and I forgot about my pain, actually. And it was quite an amazing experience.
There's a near-death experience that I did read about, which you haven't put in the book, so I hope you don't mind me bringing it up. But when you were 10 years old, you nearly drowned while collecting seafood off the coast of New Zealand where you were raised. And you turned that into an Attica dish in 2007 called Sea Tastes. For those interested, and I'm sure we all are, the dish featured mussels and clams steamed in seawater. Their juices used to flavour a clam custard that formed the base. And then you added prawn jelly, seaweed powder and sea urchin foam. Native plants from Port Phillip Bay were garnishes, pig face, grey saltbush, sea lettuce. But I heard that you're a bit embarrassed about that dish now. Why?
I mean, I am, because in all honesty, the motivation for it was expressing this experience of nearly drowning, which has happened 3 times in my life. This was the middle time. And so what I wanted to subject the diner to was the feeling of being kind of held down by a wave and having seawater stuffed up your face and your whole life flashing before you. And so yeah, I am kind of embarrassed about that, because that seems like kind of a mean thing to do and not very delicious.
Oh, was it not delicious? It sounds quite good.
It was as delicious as a 27-year-old first-time head chef can muster, with crazy ideas of recreating dishes of near death.
As delicious as a dish about drowning your diners could be, have you? Is there one about being hit by a bus? Have you created a dish about that?
There's no bus dish, no. But you know what? Now you've got me thinking. Tomorrow, something squashed, probably, maybe some sort of toasted sandwich. I don't know.
Punch them in the back of the shoulders as they're eating.
That's it. Yeah. And then just ignore them while they're in pain.
Oh, love. You have seemed to have had a lot of near-death experience. Have they in some way affected how you feel about death and dying?
They have. In fact, when I was writing the book, I considered if I was too young to write this book. But then I thought, you know what? You could literally go tomorrow and then you wouldn't be able to say all these things, and therefore you better just get on with writing it. But they have. I mean, they're humbling in that way, especially the experiences with the sea, which, I nearly perished at 3 years old. And my father tells this great story about how I was running on the beach, and where we lived, the sand dropped away to very deep water. It was black sand and there was nobody there. It's in isolation in New Zealand, and the wave crashed on the beach and sucked me straight down and under, and I disappeared immediately. And my dad said there's 2 times in his life when he's been lucky. Once when he was on his honeymoon on the Gold Coast and his wedding ring fell off his hand in the surf, and he put his hand down and he found his wedding ring, which is pretty amazing. And the second time when he went into that surf to look for me, and he put his hand down and he found me. Obviously, I don't really remember that experience. He told me later. And then, I was knocked unconscious surfing when I was in my 30s. And every time, I have an acute respect for the ocean because I've been beat down by it several times. And yeah, I'm definitely not afraid to die. Because I kind of live every day to its maximum. Literally with that thought in mind.
We are going to plan your funeral tonight to Kylie's unbridled delight, apparently. And I want to start with a question I start with everybody is, what do you think makes a good funeral?
Ooh, well, I have given this quite a lot of consideration over several years. I think for me, it's going to be the insufferably long and desperately sad playlist that I make everybody sit through. Have
you started the playlist yet?
Yes, it's called Sad Bastard Music.
There we
and
go.
It's 7 hours and 15 minutes.
You've finished it completely. That's your funeral playlist?
It's potential songs for my funeral. Now, I guess nobody would hang around if I let it go that long, but I would say that this has been a negotiation between Kylie and I and some other friends already, and I wanted about 10 songs. They wanted 2. I think we've landed on 6.
So it sounds like when I say what makes a good funeral, it's music. You haven't mentioned anything else. You said, I've given this a lot of thought, and then you mentioned a 7-hour playlist. So
well, when I say I've given it a lot of thought, I really only thought about the music.
So do you remember the last funeral that you went to?
Goodness, that's a hard question. You know what? The funeral, maybe not the last one I went to, but the ones that stand out. You know, there's one that stood out, and maybe in part would be inspiration for my own funeral because it was so beautiful. There was a great surfer in the town that I lived in, Ocean Grove, for a long, long time. Dave, he was a surfboard shaper, and he was kind of the unofficial mayor of the town. And when he passed, it was tragic the way that he passed, and he left behind two young children, and they didn't have any money, so they reached out to me and said, "Would you cater his funeral?" And I said, "Of course." And I said, "What would he like to eat?" And they said, "Chicken sandwiches and sausage rolls." And I said, "Great, that's my specialty." And so I spent 5 days making sandwiches and sausage rolls for 1,500 people, and all the ingredients were donated because the people from hospitality and from food backgrounds are so incredibly generous. And I should shout out to Gary McBean, the butcher in Brown Market, who gave away probably $3,000 worth of produce. But the coming together of everybody in this small town and celebrating this person who was a regular person but had lived kind of an exceptional life in this small community was really, really beautiful. And I'll never forget it. And also because a bikie gang turned up, and I think that's always the great sign of
No one saw that twist coming, did they?
No. If a bikie gang shows up, it's a good funeral.
I'm trying to make a good music bikie gang. Speaking of community, and I don't know if anyone should read Ben's magnificent book. It's really great, and I'm not going to talk about the book too much tonight because we are here to talk about the funeral. You will be able to hear Ben having lots of conversations about the book on the ABC in various places, but I want to talk a little bit about trigger warning lockdown. Because, you know, you're kind of infamous for really pushing through lockdown and being the face of a panicked hospitality industry, spray painting Never Give Up on the wall of Attica. And in the book you detail, it gets quite feverish, this sense of, I am going to get through this. We're going to pivot from being a fine dining restaurant to doing takeaways and deliveries. I'm going to build a bakery, and I'm going to make sure all my staff stay on full pay. And it's really inspiring and amazing to watch you in those moments while we were all, you know, in leisure wear watching Marvel films. So I was, you know, but I think that feverishness made me wonder if you've processed that, because I think a lot of people who lived through that lockdown, myself included, we think about it and you remember those really bleak days of not being able to be with the people you love and being so terrified about not knowing when it was going to end. Have you, in your feverish nature, being able to stop and sit and emotionally process not only what you achieved, but grieve what you lost?
It's a great question. And at the time that we were going through it, a really wise friend of mine, Bruce, said to me, you know, I don't think we'll reconcile this for years to come. And it really resonated with me when he said that. And as I wrote the book, I wrote about some of these issues and some of these things that happened to us. And it was part of a narrative structure of the book that my publisher was keen on me writing, and I wasn't so keen on it. And so when I revisited these stories in really microscopic detail, and I remembered the days, and I remembered, you know, not the days that people saw, but the days at the beginning. In fact, it was my birthday where I just despaired and was so lost and thought that everything was coming undone. And this restaurant that I'd built up for so many years, I was going to lose it. And so it was almost too soon to revisit those stories for me, you know. And so in a lot of ways they depressed me through the writing. I moved on to more jovial topics, and now I feel, you know, overall a lot better about it. But I'm not a person that reflects deeply on sort of what I've done. I'm sort of always looking to the next thing. And I don't know if that's just a way of hiding from it, or it's just this mechanism that I have to evolve, to create new things, rather than focusing on the past too much. But yeah, I don't know if that answers it 100%.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and as you kind of just said, I think the act of actually sitting down and having to write about it, whether you resisted that process or not, is a way of sitting in it. and revisiting those memories, as uncomfortable as they were, and looking back on it with, it's not an outsider's eye, it's still an insider's eye, but it's the eye of hindsight, which you certainly weren't able to access at the time. And we all know, I mean, writing as an act of catharsis, I think, is very important when you're processing either a grief or a loss or anything like that. So, you know, all thanks to your publisher for pushing you to write about it. I think it was probably a really healthy thing.
Thank you.
And while we're here talking about your mental health and this therapy session, there's a moment in the book where you and Kylie, again, and I won't talk about lockdown for too long, but you and Kylie decide you're going to deliver all this food to people in lockdown. There's this night, everyone gets their meals at a certain time. I'm sure we also all remember getting those fancy meals that we're all looking forward to, and you've got your schedule and you just start running behind and behind and behind and behind until by the final meal they're 90 minutes behind and just feeling like, you know, the whole thing has failed. And I want to quote you from that time, because you write this in the book saying, "My self-loathing kicked in. Quote, 'You are a worthless fucking piece of shit. What a fucking cunt you are.'" How's your self-talk now? Because I think you're extraordinary.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was kind of scary to write that down, having never actually aired that out loud before, like the way that we talk to ourselves, the way that I talk to myself. And you know, one of the editors immediately read it and said, "Oh my God, I do that too. You know, I'm brutal on myself." And so that felt kind of good, because, you know, I think sometimes with this internal stuff, we feel like we're alone, and feeling like you're alone in any situation is just one of the worst things that a human can feel. And so in a lot of ways, you know, I didn't just write it to use those words, which were kind of pleasurable to write as well, I got to say, and funny maybe, but to just let people know that everybody goes through this stuff. And in terms of how I talk to myself now, I mean, I should say this doesn't happen too often, but that was a moment of such desperation and failure, and we were just reeling. We're sitting in the car after this failed delivery run, and we'd pinned all of our hopes and dreams onto this being successful, and it was so far below our standard that it was unimaginable to us. And I was just venting my frustration because I couldn't control the situation. There's nothing I could do, and because we started a brand new business and we were just absolute beginners, and it all just come out in this moment with Kylie and I bawling out the back of the restaurant in this van in the car park. And the next day, you know, I was a bit kinder to myself. We picked ourselves up and we kept going.
You and I this will be, it might be one of the last self-help questions, but we talked a little bit backstage, because you said you have a lot of trouble sitting still or being still for, you know, half an hour and get quite agitated. And of course, I was like, "Do you meditate, Ben?" He's like, "Oh!" He almost like jumped out of his seat. No. Therapy? Go to therapy?
Yeah.
Good.
I went to therapy. I tried to go to therapy, I should say, for this book, actually. For the way that the book would be perceived, for the way that I might be attacked as I wrote, you know, when it was released. I tried to go to a therapist. I did go to a therapist. I didn't try. I did actually go. It just didn't actually work. But the point was, I think when writers reveal a lot of themselves, you know, that's exciting to a publisher. But then the writer's sort of left with it afterwards to deal with it, you know, on a daily basis. And I've been really honest in the book, and I hadn't pulled any punches. And I was scared about what I'd written initially. And so I just kind of wanted to talk to somebody about how I might plan for trying to handle that. And through that experience, you know, I guess it was helpful. I learned that I was already prepared for that, and that I'd been sort of doing that for a long time anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm gonna yes and you, Ben. Is that yes? When you write a book like that, and the publisher's excited that you've exposed yourself, but you're left with it, and then you have to go and talk about it again. And you know, we often think about trauma memoirs or memoirs that are about grief, and it's one thing to put it on the page, have it edited, have it out in the world, knowing that people are reading your personal experience, but then people going, "What was it like when you called yourself a cunt, Ben?" You're like, "Oh God, it's taken me back to that time." And so do you feel like this book tour has been safe for you, revisiting those spaces again?
It's been so safe. I was worrying about things that probably not going to eventuate. And part of it was a worry. It wasn't just about how, I might be perceived by people that I'm meeting, but generally, like, people are so amazing, and the feedback has been overwhelming and so positive. But I'd also spoken truth to power, and I'd called out people who don't like being called out, who are not used to being called out, and I knew that they would attack me. And so Kylie and I had to sit with this discomfort for a long period of time, about 2 years after I wrote that, and we had to decide whether or not we'd even be able to run the restaurant in the future. And ultimately we decided through that time that if we would find out whether we would be able to, and if we couldn't, then we figured it wasn't worth doing it anymore.
I'm going to take you back to your death plan for a moment. Have you written a will?
I do have a will. It's very complex.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
I wish it wasn't.
What makes it so, if you don't mind me asking, what makes it so complex?
Because I care about the people who I'm tasked with looking after, not just my family, but the employees and the suppliers, and everybody that's sort of involved with the project of Attica. And so if I died, what happens to all of those people? Is everything taken care of? Are all of our debts paid down? And then, where are my kids, and where is Kylie? And I mean, we went into microscopic detail on this will, right to even asking, this is not questions that I asked myself, this was a financial planner, I've never used one before, the very first time. They asked us questions like, so Kylie, if Ben is, well, this is not even for the one, this doesn't apply actually, but if he died, what sort of services might you need in your life post him dying? Like, will you need, like, if you're older, will you need live-in help? Will you need therapy? Will you need counselling? So all of these kind of questions came out of this process of writing the will, which were uncomfortable and sat with us both for several weeks. And despite Kylie's enthusiastic smile or laugh about my potential death, there's actually nothing, as far as I know, there's nothing that she could imagine worse than that. She has more of a fear of it than I do,
And do you update your will? Is it something that you revisit, this complex will?
It was updated a year ago, and it's still pretty right. So, but yes, I will have to.
It is, and I appreciate you sharing that. And of course, Kylie, I don't think that you think Ben dying is funny. It was just a moment that I very much enjoy backstage. But that is the moments that we do sit in when we sit down to write our will, is actually having to think about practical things. We think about things we can't comprehend, which is the emotional aftermath of when we lose someone we love. And that, even though we can potentially intellectualise that, it still whomps us in a way that we didn't expect. But those practical questions, as uncomfortable as they are important conversations to have. So I'm glad that you're able to have them. What do you think constitutes a good death?
Well, I think to go quick for me, and in some ways to go younger than older, and to not leave it so it was too hard on those who, the family and the people that are left behind. Today Kylie and I were discussing, she brought this up, we're discussing death planning, and how would you pay for a funeral? If one of us died now, would we be able to afford it? Would it be super stressful? So I feel like a good death for me would be, for me personally, to die, of course, without pain, without very much pain, to go quickly, but also not to leave a mess behind for everybody. And, my grandfather died quite young. He died in a plane crash, and it's a source of trauma for my family. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it was very, very hard on my family when that happened. It was unexpected. And so I guess, maybe some part of me carries that memory as a 5-year-old of learning of that experience. I still remember the telephone call, and we learned what had happened, and and I know it was very, very hard on my family.
Yeah, of course, and I appreciate you sharing that. And those are sometimes it's intergenerational trauma ripples, but the rocks that are thrown in the rivers of our family that ripple out for the rest of us. And Kylie, I know from meeting her, but also through your book, seems such an organised person and gets things done. We were talking about holidays that she's arranged for. And I also love that you both knew that you were coming to this event, and she starts talking about costs and what it's going to cost. And I'm curious and excited to know what you do have planned for your funeral as I ask you these questions, because Kylie was like, as she walked out of the green room before, she said, yeah, we're going to have to talk about this. So I think there are some grand plans, which doesn't surprise me, but maybe I'll start with that. So Ben Shewry's died. We're all very sad. I want to know, is the plan, are we having a punk show? Is there a smoking ceremony? Do you get roasted on a spit? Like, where do we go?
Well, my first thought was, where would the funeral be? Because, I live in a lot of ways between two countries, the country where I was born and raised, New Zealand, and my home, Australia. So immediately I thought, well, would it be in New Zealand? But then the second thought that I had was all those type of people that want to have their wedding in San Sebastian and make everybody go to San Sebastian, how insufferable that is. So I settled on, no, it wouldn't be in New Zealand, because that'd be too annoying for my friends and family. And almost all of my friends are in Australia now, and there's some in New Zealand, but not so many, so they can come here. So it would be in Australia, and it would most likely be 3-part.
To write this down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we have a great house. It's a mid-century house, which we're lovingly restoring ourselves. I was working on it yesterday. So we would want to do something in this wonderful house where we've shared many happy memories. It's the first house that Kylie and I have owned together. So we would have something small there.
Start in the house, okay.
Yep, in the house. And then, of course, Attica is something I've dedicated so much of my life to, and there's so many momentous events there. And we recently did a little friends and family book launch there, and I was reminded of what a special place it is for so many of my community. And so we would want to do something at Attica. And then, this is, really quite a lot. We wanted to do something, if there was interest, there'd be something maybe public, and that would be in a natural landscape, either by the coast, or maybe I thought we could make everybody hike to the top of Mount Buller, because I had a lot of fun times there. And then that would be sort of give people this opportunity to kind of sit in their grief and think about how painful this is to walk up this mountain, also how painful it is that they've lost me. So that's kind of it. Now, just to finish, though, Kylie did say to me, that's a lot to organise. That seems like a lot more than our wedding. And our wedding was at the registry office and was for 11 people. So it's quite elaborate, but...
I do like that you're giving people the option to physicalise their grief as well, that they're hiking and they're like, my body is in pain as well as my heart being in pain, which I think is actually quite poetic. Who's the dream MC for your funeral?
Well, very clear choice, Jacinda Ardern. Just because she's a total legend, legend. And I don't want to name drop, but she is a friend. Maybe you should do it. I don't know. And she's every bit as good as advertised.
Yeah.
But that would be my dream. But then I kind of have a backup, more realistic, and that would probably be Eric Jensen, the editor of the Saturday paper.
Yeah.
Because Eric's a very dear friend, but also because he is incredibly articulate with words, and I know that he'd do it right.
Yeah, I love that you two are kind of later in life friends, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm a kind of big open heart at making new friends later in life, and that you were pen pals. You wrote to each other, and Eric, you might know from editing the Saturday paper, is such a beautiful writer, and you connected through your words and shared love of food as well.
And to this day, he wrote me a letter as my pen pal today, and we share, the beauty and the sadness and the experiences of our life. And we have one rule in every letter, and that is to share a beauty, no matter what is going wrong. We must share one beauty, one thing that we've seen. Could be anything. Could be a conversation. Could be tonight. Could be a work of art. It's quite often a work of art with Eric. It's quite often something that I've experienced with my children or with Kylie. But it's just a rule that we have. And of course, he writes incredibly beautifully and in a different way than he does as a professional. It's really meaningful.
How often do you write to each other?
It has been up to 2-3 times a day, and at the moment it's probably, we got a little slack, it's probably once a week.
Handwritten in the post?
Emails,
right.
Yep. Deliberately written emails, considered emails. And it can be quite time consuming, I should say. It takes Eric probably 2 minutes to write it, but it takes me I'm not the fastest writer, it probably takes me about 20 minutes to respond.
I was saying to Ben before we took the stage as well that he's a genuinely really great writer. I already knew that I'd enjoy the book because of the lived experience, but there's a real electricity to your writing which is so beautiful to enjoy. So Eric is lucky to be a correspondent of yours as well.
Thank you.
Now, you spoke about living life so fully, and that is quite palpable. You've achieved a lot in 47 years. What else do you want to accomplish before you die?
Oh, I mean, geez, really, you ask the hard questions.
Thank you.
I mean, I think I'm not a great planner. You know, I would like to continue to make new friends, to have, you know, this life that I live, I feel so blessed. I never knew it would turn out like this. And everything that I do and everything that I've done is around meeting incredible people and having just life-changing experiences with them. And the restaurant is been this incredible and is this incredible vehicle for this. You never know who's going to come into your dining room. And by that, I don't mean a very, very famous person, although it could be Jacinda Ardern. Has been Jacinda Ardern. Just twice. But it could just be, you know, it could be a plumber who's just really passionate about life and just wants to share how great their bolognese is with you, and you just get stoked about talking to them about that. And so it's just this kind of amazing dynamic that, you know, and it's something that hospitality workers really kind of have, and it's so precious. It's just this ability to kind of meet people on their own terms daily and have and also have this community that's kind of coming to be with you. And the work that we do, we're so fortunate, such a privilege to be able to create this food and create this experience, and then and the real privilege is, of course, people coming, and every day we earn the right to do that again, you know. And that's really so I just want to kind of continue to do that, and also then just absorb more and more new things and different influences, and just have experiences like this and meet great people. I want to write another book. That's it, really. I don't have any grand plan, you know. I'm a very live in the moment sort of a person.
Well, that kind of speaks to my next question, which I feel like I know the answer to, because you were in such forward motion. There's such a sense of propulsion about you and your life and your drive, even though you said you're driven but without not real purpose, but you know what I mean, no real end point. But how do you cope with regrets? Do you have any regrets?
So I'm complex like that because, you know, at different moments I think, oh, I have no regrets, but then that's just an awful human characteristic to be a person living without any regrets. And absolutely I do have regrets. I think it's probably a deflection for me. In the book, you know, I write about what I call my greatest regrets, certainly one of my greatest regrets. And I think the regrets really, though, have been the times that I didn't stand up. You know, the times that I wasn't the best version of myself, something was happening, something was wrong, and I didn't have the courage of my convictions to stand up to it, and I let it happen, or I walked past it. And those are the things that, you know, I sit with to this day. And they don't own me because we've all got to come back from somewhere. We've all got to be able to have the space to admit our ignorance and to learn. And so in a lot of ways, perhaps some of these experiences, and I know I'm not being very specific, but some of these experiences, they sort of will define how you become in a positive way rather than just a solely negative way. You know, I think, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's how you sit with that uncomfortable feeling and not self-flagellate. You're able to reflect and do better next time.
That's it, you know, and just if the next time a similar bad thing happens, you do have the confidence and you do go, you know what, it actually is upon me and it's upon all of us to do something about it.
So we're gathered at your house and then Attica and then the top of Mount Buller today with Jacinda Ardern emceeing to celebrate the life of Ben Shewry. It was a big gathering, lots of people in attendance.
I reckon, hopefully, yeah, it'd be nice.
Now, you said, it's funny because you said you just wore your favourite shirt, you didn't think about it being your funeral shirt, but then you said there is a dress code for your funeral. What's the dress code?
So, sharp suits. No, unfortunately, everybody's going to have to sort of bankrupt their accounts because they won't tolerate any poor suits and poorly fitted suits, so tailors. Colour, that's okay. Colour's just fine. Self-expression, encouraged, but just high quality, sharp lines. That's pretty much. Yeah, Tom Ford, Yep. Even, if you're paying it off for 10 years, not
And
my
then
problem.
they'll think of
Not
you every
my
time they get
problem.
that afterpay reminder. Oh, Ben.
That's it. What
There we go.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
We talked about the 7 hours, how many? 19 minutes of the
15 minutes.
15-minute Sad Bastard?
Sad Bastard
playlist for your funeral. You're a music obsessive. You write very beautifully about music and your relationship with Yo La Tengo and how you built that up. As much as I would love to go through every song on the 7 hour, 15-minute playlist, what are the big song or songs that you want played at your funeral?
There's a song by this band called Purple Mountains. David Berman, it's essentially one person. It's a terribly sad album, and there's a song called All My Happiness Is Gone. That'd be the first song.
Great.
Then Will Oldham or
yes.
Bonnie Prince Billy.
Oh, yes.
I See a Darkness.
Oh, yes, Ben. Oh, yes.
And then, of course, because you mentioned Yo La Tengo, Needle of Death. It's very uplifting.
Is that a cover of the...
It is a cover.
Yeah,
it's
the Bert Jansch song.
Yes,
is that
it is.
right?
Yeah,
it is. Okay. Yo La Tengo doing a Bert Jansch cover. All right, Needle of Death. Who do you think is going to deliver the eulogy?
The eulogy. Adam Briggs.
That is going to be quite the eulogy.
Senator Briggs.
And so we've done the big hike up the hill. We've had some sampling at home, and then Attica. I assume is there a wake after the hill hike? And if there is there a food? I would assume
Yes.
there's a food and bev service. And is it
Absolutely.
chicken sandwiches and sausage rolls? What's the food
No,
and bev
I mean,
offering?
I don't want to make it too delicious because I don't want it to be too uplifting. But no. So I've got that actually pretty well planned out here. So hot chips.
Yep.
Hot chips, really salty.
Do you use chicken salt?
No, normal salt. Yep.
Okay.
Hand cut.
We don't
hot
judge our
chips.
salt, but yes.
Homemade
okay,
hot
yep.
chips. Yep.
Homemade, yeah.
Have a great friend I've mentioned already, Gary McBean, who makes a great smoked ham. So he'd be there carving the smoked ham for everybody. It'd be glistening, maybe glazed with apricot jam, cloves, little mustard. He'd be carving it. He's a very imposing, lovely, kind human.
He's
It's so
imposing,
good.
and his name's Gary McBean. That's not an imposing name.
He's as tall as a bean sprout, a beanstalk, though. He's
He's
6 foot,
McBean by
6
name
foot
and
6.
McBean by nature.
Yeah.
So he's towering. So he's carving up
He'd
glazed
be carving ham, plates of ham. We'd have Uncle Noel Butler, Ewan Budawang mentor, and he'd be doing a traditional seafood cook-up, which he's an absolute expert at, and that'd be just a tremendously entertaining and delicious thing. My cousin, John Shewry, would come from New Zealand to lay a hangi, and he would dig the hangi and serve everybody. He does a beautiful hangi. And lastly, my mother and father, Kay and Rob, who taught me how to make lasagna. Of course, they would be making lasagna.
Of course. I don't know. Show of hands, who has read Ben's book here already? Oh, you've got so much to look forward to. I thought the chapter on lasagna was the longest chapter in the book, but apparently there's one longer. But there is a lot about lasagna in this book, including a recipe, which is great. Now, I am about to start soliciting questions. It's behind me, isn't it? The QR code. Is that work? Does anyone want to? We also have a roving mic, which is, I know, the traditional way we ask questions. And before I solicit Slido or Mike otherwise, are there any questions here for Ben? They don't have to be about death. You can talk to him about food or his book or anything. We've got one up the back. Thank you so much. And I appreciate this is I'm not quite sure how to use this system either. I'm sure it's very easy and I can see questions coming in, but, roving mics are the way to go. Are you happy to answer some questions?
Oh,
Ben?
yeah,
okay,
please.
Great.
Any questions?
Great.
Hi, Ben. I just wondered, you haven't spoken about anything to drink yet, and I'm just curious about maybe like a non-alc and an alc, or
Okay.
a wine and a cocktail, or,
That's so funny because
such a great
we were
question.
talking about off-menu before and how much I love it. We're practically doing off-menu now and I'm very happy about it.
Thanks. That's just such a great question. So the restaurant Francois the famous French restaurant in South Yarra. They would be at my funeral. All of the French waiters, they wouldn't be lined up. They'd be kind of just moving through the crowd like French waiters do, and they would have champagne. So everybody have to have a glass of champagne. Then everybody would have to have a martini, and because it's Francois tradition, they would have to chase that with a shot of tequila, because that's what the waiters do at Francois.
Whoa, we're getting lit at this funeral, I tell you what. Okay.
And non-alcoholic, I don't really have anything.
Designated drivers can stay at home. Were there any other questions on the mic while we're here? There's one down the front. I'm sorry, thank you, beautiful Wheeler Centre staff. Do you want to just raise your hand so we know where you are? There you are, just in the second row here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ben, for sharing tonight. Firstly, I was one of those people standing on the pavement outside Attica during the dark time of COVID, and I just want to thank you for one of the special memories that I have during that really difficult time. So even though you provided your staff with that incentive, you also provided those who shared the meals with a fabulous experience. My question is, on your deathbed, just before you go, after telling your family how much you love them and how proud you are of them, what dish will you think about that you're most proud of?
Ooh.
That,
Like the dish
That's
that
a
I've
great question.
the dish,
Thank you.
okay, so I'm not going to go to any of my own dishes. I've got to go to a food that I ate in the book. It's the buttocks of a pig, and I'm not selling it. It's called culatello, and it's made by this incredible artisan called Massimo Spigaroli. And to make this culatello is complicated and never comes to Australia because Italians are smart. They don't send their good stuff here. And we ate it in Emilia-Romagna, a staff member and I, maybe a decade ago. And it was like one of the greatest things I've ever eaten in my life. I wrote about it as a holy grail ham. It's like prosciutto, but 1,000 times better. So maybe just like as I'm dying, I'm thinking about clouds of little thin slices, like stained glass windows, just coming down, settling on my mouth, the fat melting a little bit. Yes, that's it.
That's such a good question too. Thank you. This is a motif, and thank you for someone who's figured out how to use Slido. Not a question, but a thank you. Your lockdown takeaway meal brought me to my now partner and love back into my life.
Wow.
And congrats on an epic funeral. I mean, just in relation to that last question as well, you really get this sense of, we go way back to the funeral that you talked about in Ocean Grove and the sense of community that turned up for that man. And that's what you've built. I mean, even just from 2 questions alone, not just through lockdown, but ongoingly, your heart is on a plate and for so much that you do. Are you able to stop and acknowledge what you've put out there and how you've helped people in that way?
I could just go to one story from that time and from that bake shop, which is so special to me in my heart. It's the first day of our plan to save our business, and we've opened a bakery and a takeaway delivery business on the same day, and I've been up about 70 hours continuously, and I'm in the bake shop. There's a line around the block. A woman comes in and she says to me, I've just lost my job and I wanted to come and spend $7 of my last pay with you because you're a community guy. And she took this piece of cheesecake, and as she told me this, she began to cry. And I burst into tears. And we hugged. We shouldn't have hugged because it's COVID, but fuck it. We hugged. And I said to myself, you know what? I never, ever want to forget this moment, how special that was to me, that this person going through such a hard time found it in their heart. It was so humbling that they'd come to our little makeshift bake shop to spend $7 on a piece of cheesecake. It's a real highlight of my whole career, actually, that thinking about that moment.
I love that. I'm glad you're able to accept that. And there's a lot of emotion in the book. You cry a lot in the book. And I love that as someone who cries. I think it's healthy for us all to kind of wash everything through. But you cry not just when things are bad, you get very emotional. You cried writing the book, I believe.
Yes.
Kylie and your kids were watching you with your headphones on, arms flailing, occasionally weeping and screaming to yourself. You speak so beautifully about Wednesdays at 4 p.m, which is the staff speeches at Attica, which you give a different staff member a chance to speak. And sometimes it's about a lived trauma, sometimes it's about footy tips, but for you, it's about them getting to know each other as a community. You're building a community within that space, not just outside the walls too, right?
And it starts there. I think community starts in your home, it starts in your workplace, and that you focus on starting it there, then it can expand to other places. But if you aren't looking after the community and the place that you're responsible for, you just can't possibly help. You just can't imagine that it would go any further. And so that's first and foremost. And staff speeches, which you talk about, such as sort of a sacred thing to us, something we've been doing for 13 years. It's around building empathy, because we have two different jobs in the restaurant. We have the kitchen and we have the front of house, and they take different personalities and different skills. And sometimes people don't come into much contact with each other because they work in different parts of the building. And so this is about creating somewhere for our people to express who they really are, and to show that they're not just a number. And it's a way of the rest of us just listening and asking questions. And through that, it's led not only to having a more empathetic workplace, it's led to higher performance. And so I write, and that kindness is the older sibling of performance. And I truly believe that.
Does anyone have it? We've got time for a couple more questions if you wanted to squeeze any in. You don't? Oh, there's one right up the back. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, we've only got the one mic, so we have to kind of rove a little bit.
Hi, Ben. Madiha here. I'm not sure if you remember Babar. He did this podcast with you on how you source ants during lockdown time, and that has been a career highlight for him. My question is around, less about the funeral, apologies, but more around, I know you're a great person. I have read your book, but how do you keep yourself grounded? Because we do see people who potentially start off with a lot of compassion and passion for what they do, especially in hospitality, but then it just eats them up in the success, or like you've mentioned in your, the reviews and everything. What do you do every single day to keep yourself grounded?
It's a tremendous question, and it's true. The more successful people become, the harder it can be for them just to keep their feet on the ground. Two things that I do every day. I never forget where I come from, my humble upbringing. In New Zealand, having no money, I never forget coming to Australia with very little money. And the main thing is I absolutely, every single day, I remind myself of my true love, and that is cooking. That's the practice of cooking that I've been doing now for almost my entire life. And that has, other than my family, has brought me more joy than anything else. And so that is what brought the restaurant the success in the first place, the love of cooking, the love of people. And that's what I return to. That's how I keep myself grounded, because nothing else matters, actually. It's just the continuous focus of that craft and the ideas about it. I hope that answers the question. It's just about, it's really just trying to define, though, very simply, where the bullshit is and where the joy is. And the joy is for me in the cooking, and everything else is not very important.
There's a question that's come in here saying, up until today, what has been the most difficult decision you've had to make in terms of your career? Are you saying it was difficult for him to come here today? And what reasons led you to make this decision?
Probably one of the hardest things for a hospitality worker to achieve is to become the owner of a business. The thing about power is power wants to keep its power. And so in restaurants, especially with bigger groups and bigger chains, we sort of kept in our places as restaurant workers. So we're just the labour force that's the engine room. We don't ever really get taught about business or really encouraged to own businesses. And because we're quite, we're some of the more low paid and overworked people in society, it's a really, really hard place to get financially, but certainly mentally into the frame of mind to own a business. So making the decision and getting myself into the position to own Attica actually was a huge mental hurdle, because I had decades of self-denial and unworthiness, and we're told not only by business people but also by journalists that we're no good at running business. When a restaurant closes, often what food writers will say is, well, that's because they're just a chef or a waiter. And so that's probably been the hardest, to actually lay it all on the line and go, you know what, you need to do this. And it's been a great joy being the business owner for the last 8-9 years.
We have, this is a great, I'll do 2 quick ones. Carbon steel or stainless?
Stainless, because I'm kind of lazy at cleaning the blade.
And this one I like. I've enjoyed your lockdown meals. I scheduled my therapist appointments close to your bakery opening times. Less for the therapy, more for Attica.
Wow.
Which I really like.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Ben, what do you hope is your epitaph?
I don't care about legacy at all. So I would just want to be remembered for somebody who was nice to other people.
What are we going to put on your tombstone?
He built good playlists.
We're back to the music again. He built good playlists. So if I may run through your funeral again, just so we've got all the detail right. We're at your house in Attica, then we're hiking to the top of Mount Buller with Jacinda Ardern and perhaps Eric Jensen emceeing. We're all dressed in very expensive, sharp suits, no less. I'm sure there's going to be a dress code, someone at the door going, no, not expensive enough.
100%.
You're out, you're out. The music will be played, Yola Tango covering Bert Jansch, Needle of Death, Purple Mountains, All My Happiness Is Gone, and Will Oldham's Bonnie Prince Billy, I See a Darkness. As we're all feasting on our homemade hot chips, very salty chips, and glazed smoked ham served by the Bean, Gary McBean, and Uncle Noel's Seafood while John makes a hangi. Francois waiters will be wafting around between us, moving through the crowd, serving champagne martinis and forcing us to have a shot of tequila after the martinis. How's that sounding for a funeral?
It sounds like heaven to me. I mean...
And then we all stand around your grave, slowly paying off our expensive suits, looking
Cursing
at the
my
words, he built good playlists.
Uh-huh.
I think that sounds like a great funeral. Can we clap Ben's funeral for him, please? Thank you. Oh, and quickly, we've had one more come in. Is there any secret? This is a cooking tip, I see you. Is there any secret to the funeral hot chips, someone has said?
There is. The right potato is the absolute key. So floury potato, locally grown, in season, and cut, soaked in cold water, then blanched or steamed, then deep fried until very, very crisp.
There you go. We come for the death, but we stay for the chippies. That's what we do. Ben, it's been a real honour speaking to you tonight. It was a real honour even just getting the space to sit with your beautiful book. And I know a lot of you will read it tonight and meet Ben and get more recipe tips by the sounds of things. Thank you to the Wheeler Centre for even making the space for us to do this. I've been doing this podcast since February of this year. We don't know what we're doing, we just make it. That's what people doing podcasts do. And I've had such an honour of speaking to people about death and mortality and survival and resilience and grief and how we go on when we think we can't go on. And I couldn't do it. My beautiful producer Darren is here tonight, and Andy, who does the video edits, and the three of us, a little team who does this. So I love you and thank you. I also really want to acknowledge the privilege of being able to engage death in these spaces. that we can be funny and we can make jokes and we're hypothesizing about Ben's death, but there is a lot of brutality and grief and death in this world as well, and it's a privilege to be able to carve out an hour and to speak about it in this way that I hope is safe for everybody. Even though this is ostensibly a light-hearted conversation, these things can still bring up things for us. So really look after yourselves tonight. There are accessible things either via our podcast or through the Wheeler Centre website, or just friends, or just be near a dog, honestly. And I'm not being lighthearted about it. Sometimes that's all you need, is just to anchor yourself and to ground with an animal. Ben, you're an extraordinary human being. I'm glad your self-talk has improved, because if only you could see yourself like we see you. I'm really excited to go to your funeral. Not just for the chips and the martinis, it's all going to be really good. Would you please join me in thanking tonight Ben Shewry?
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Great. Yeah, no,
okay?
I feel well prepared for death.
You feel well prepared for death. Well, that's how we want to end the evening as well. What a gift to be in this space with you all and sharing this. Thank you all so much for coming and celebrating the Wheeler Centre Spring Fling. Ben will be escorted like a fucking rock star off the stage now, up like Steven Tyler, carried to the readings table. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.